Good morning and welcome to Vision in Action Live today. I'm Jim Boswell. I'm your host and the author of Lifelong Fulfillment, Take Charge of Your Life. On Vision in Action Live podcasts, we focus on the point solutions and expert knowledge that it takes to work on individual personal development. These are the puzzle pieces that allow you to construct the complete picture of the life of your fondest dreams. To this end, we bring you representative experts from every conceivable discipline that can inform your thinking about your own journey to lifelong fulfillment. Again, welcome to the program. Today, we have a discussion with Garret Biss, who is an ex-US Marine Corps pilot and now a certified professional recovery coach, or certified human potential trainer, an addiction recovery coach, and he's also been a TEDx speaker, and he's also the creator of the ValiantPath Veterans Coaching Initiative. Welcome to the program, Garret. We're pleased.
Thanks so much for. I'm grateful to be here, Jim. Thank you so much. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, we're going to look into some of this, but let's just start with the introduction I made, if I've missed anything, and in particular to tell us how you arrived at coaching and some of the things that you have encountered in your career and lifetime to date.
Yeah, so I think my journey into coaching is probably similar to most people that are in this field or this profession, going through some challenging, some dark periods of my own life, finding a mentor, finding some coaching that helped guide me through that, which really helped me. I mean, you can't get me to argue against the value of coaching. I mean, I experienced it firsthand, and I see what it was able to do and help in my life. And then as somebody, and as many individuals in coaching or mental health field, as somebody that's gone through a dark period of your own life and come out of it, somehow I feel more connected to other individuals that are in a dark place. So it really inspires this passion to do what I can to kind of pass it along, share some things that have helped me out so that I can help other individuals alleviate some of that pain or that suffering in their life and ultimately get to where they want to be in the expression of their life.
Oh, yeah. And I come from a similar initiative and background as well. So anyway, I know you're kind of focused in the veterans arena, but let's go through some of the questions that the audience might be interested in. So for instance, what are the core challenges that, veterans face, for those of us that don't know, coming out of service?
So one of the biggest challenges, I think, it stems from the fact that many individuals, when they enter the service, they do so at 18, 19, 20, 22 years old. So much of their life and so much of their identity is really being formed or developed through the lens of military service. Mm-hmm. So years later, whether it's 4 years later, 20 or 30 years later, when you transition out, what I understand, it's really like going through another adolescence period where you're trying to find your identity, find your place, find your sense of belonging, and figure out what you can do to make an impact or a contribution or to experience a sense of meaning and purpose. And that's very disassociating. It's very disorienting for veterans. I don't feel that we're adequately prepared for that transition or that challenge. Granted, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of tools and resources that are offered so the veterans can, meet their basic needs, go find a job, improve their resume, find a place to live, but not enough on the emotional, the mental health, and even some of the spiritual challenges that all come up out of that transition.
Oh, okay. So in general, can we just simply say that most veterans that come out of veteran service, do kind of face a bumpy road ahead? A lot of them are not getting initial guidance. I know the federal service when I was in didn't do it. And so it's kind of one of these, oh, shock, I'm out. I don't have to report for work today. What do I do now?
Right. Yeah, a lot of challenges with that, with the identity, with meaning, with just kind of some basic fundamental values, beliefs, and understandings of the world and the place that we are in it, or the value, the way that we show up in it. Very disorienting. And some veterans do just fine and they don't skip a beat and they just keep marching on. But most veterans, every veteran I've talked to, of course, has some real kind of interpersonal challenges, and it affects the way that they show up, and then that quickly affects the way that they feel about themselves and the self-value and the self-worth that they have, and then that affects their actions. And unfortunately, it gets a lot of people into a pretty dark and challenging place.
Right. It's kind of like feeling, I think, like you might have lost your way. I think there's a common thing too here in the professional development space is that in general, most people don't come to it with the idea that they're planning for their life and the transitions of life. They come to it in crisis, crisis of confidence. Like you said, you're abusing certain things about your body and your mind that, really aren't going to help you. They exacerbate the situation. So what preventative measures can veterans take to, kind of maybe minimize the angst part of it and let them be a bit more productive as they go into their new life, right? What do you seem to see?
I think first and foremost, just an awareness about it. I mean, nobody goes into the military with this misconception that it's going to be easy. Everybody expects a challenge. They know that it's going to be hard and difficult, and they also know that they're going to grow significantly because of that. There's many things in our life that create pain and suffering, but if we know that it's going to come, then we feel much better prepared and we have a greater sense of hope to go through that. So if you and I were to go for a very difficult workout or a long run today, we'd know that for the next day or two, we're probably going to be a little sore. So that's not unexpected. So it's much easier to face that, and we know that it's going to go away. If you're caught off guard, if you find yourself in the darkness like I did, and you didn't see it coming and you don't understand why, it's very disorienting and disassociating, and creates, for me, it really challenged my sense of faith or hope that things could get better, because I didn't understand what got me there. So I couldn't understand or even really have faith that there was a pathway out of it. So I think awareness is a big thing. That was really the mission behind the TEDx that I delivered early this year, which talks about the unspoken trauma that all veterans face, which to me, I understand that as that transition from military service, and how in many ways, for many veterans, that in and of itself is a traumatic experience.
Right, right. And there's a confidence issue, I think, in the veterans community too, about who they should go to and would prefer to go to. And I think the people that practice the civilian side of it are probably not as adept as maybe yourself with, your past history. Maybe you care to comment on that and what you observe.
Yeah, I certainly agree. So one of the unfortunate things about military service is there's certainly an element there where it encourages us to suck it up, to deal with our pain, to keep it to ourselves, to not jeopardize the mission or not bring our worries, to the table. There's too many other things to worry about. And that can serve us to a degree while we're in the service or while we're working towards that mission. But if you carry that out into the civilian world, the downside of that and the really dark side of that is many individuals will suffer silently, or they'll suck it up, or they'll take on too much until it gets to that crisis situation. And then it's a very difficult or challenging thing to dig out of. And one of the biggest barriers that I've seen, especially for veterans, is, for one, our identity is already challenged. Our ability to show up as we are and to feel safe expressing who we are. I myself, and maybe you experienced this, when I came out of the military, I found very, very quickly that the way that I showed up, the level of intensity that I had, this mission-driven kind of focus all of the time, my dark sense of humor, these weren't things that were really welcomed or accepted in the civilian world. And unfortunately, what that did to me was it told me, I better not show up like this. I better show up as they expect me to show up, or I better show up as a version of myself. So that can further erode our sense of self-worth and our sense of self-confidence. So when we're already kind of faced with this challenge of connecting with others that haven't been in the service, that's a huge barrier for a veteran to go seek help from somebody who hasn't gone through something similar, that kind of speaks the same lingo or has been in a similar experience. So it's just one more of many barriers that unfortunately veterans face. And this isn't just true of veterans. It can be true for a lot of individuals that have a hard time finding somebody that they really feel safe and can connect with, so they can get into doing some of the deep work that they need to do.
Right, right. Now, I understand you use evidence-based practices in your consulting work. Maybe you could speak to that so we understand how that dynamic works.
Yeah, so I could talk all day about evidence-based practices. So there are some components of it. Many of the strengths-based interventions or focuses have an evidence-based element to it. Mm-hmm. And there's value in that because it helps. I think there's value in it because it helps individuals feel comfortable with it. And a lot of the things that we experience in our life, we experience what we expect. And for some reason, when somebody is experiencing or they utilize the tool that they know has been proven to be effective in others, then that can help increase the efficacy of using that tool or that approach or process in their life. That said, I do know that, for every evidence-based practice that's out there, at one time it wasn't evidence-based. So that doesn't mean that it wasn't effective. It just means that it hadn't been studied to the extent and been certified as an evidence-based practice. With that in mind, there's a lot of other things out there that could be just as effective, if not more effective, as some evidence-based practices that we can integrate into our work. There's one of the most profound transformational tools that I've been introduced to is called RIM, or regenerating images in memory. And it's a modality for emotional processing and emotional healing, which can be the root of some really extreme transformations in individuals' lives. It's going through a study right now to be recognized as an evidence-based practice, but it's not yet. Doesn't mean that it's not just as effective as once it gets that kind of stamp of approval. The other thing I always think of with evidence-based practices is I see the value in having that label, but I also understand that just because it's evidence-based doesn't mean it's a panacea. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution for everybody. So it doesn't mean that it's going to be, it doesn't guarantee an outcome just because it's evidence-based. It's evidence-based because there's enough evidence to support the fact that it's efficacious for, in some instances, for some individuals.
Right.
So I just like to remind people that, and really just stepping back in general, I understand everybody's life journey is a combination of the experiences that they had, the environment that they've lived in, some of the things that they've been through. Every individual has different strengths, different desires. Every individual's journey to get from where they are to where they want to get to is going to be a different path. It's going to require different tools and resources. So I always remind people of that, remind myself of that, because if there's an outcome that you're trying to reach and the tools and the resources that you've utilized haven't gotten you there, then find some other tools and resources. Maybe they worked for somebody else who was starting in a different place. Now you have a different set of circumstances and a different set of interpersonal tools to work with. So go find the best tools or processes to help you ultimately get to that outcome. So evidence-based can be very effective, and there's evidence to prove that or suggest that, just like the name says. But it doesn't mean that it's necessarily, it's not going to be. Again, it's not a one size fits all. It's not a guarantee of an outcome just because it's evidence based.
Right. So if I'm a person looking for help and I have just come out, I'm more than likely to be stuck on one issue. And it seems to me, and I'd like to hear your view on this, that until I resolve that issue to some extent, that I don't have really attention to give to the overall challenge in multiple disciplines that I face in terms of realigning my life, or even knowing what my dreams and objectives and goals really are now that I'm out. Maybe you have some comments on that kind of thought.
Certainly. So I think, for us to have the best use of our cognitive and our executive function to do some of the planning, to leverage some of, to be empowered, to be in an empowered place, to leverage the tools and the resources and the strengths that we have, it does require some basic fundamental human needs to be met first. Because if we're not meeting some of those basic fundamental human needs, then it puts us into this fight or flight state or this hyper aroused state, right, in which case we don't have access to some of the beautiful parts of our brain that help us leverage the best and kind of overcome challenges and obstacles. So for anybody, and this can show up differently, if you are in that constantly triggered state, or if you are in a reactionary state, maybe your life has slipped down a slope to the point where now you're relying on a substance or behavior in order to deal with an emotion inside. And that's the best that you can do. And that's become a real need for you because you've lost the capacity to deal with it in a more productive way. Then getting out of that darkness or getting out of that hole and kind of standing back on your own 2 feet is the first place to start. Otherwise, all the tools, resources, books, coaching, it's not really going to matter if you yourself aren't back in a place where you can execute on some of those things, or even think about the future. If you're in a survival moment, you're not thinking about what do I want 5 years from now. You're thinking about how do I get out of this pain that I'm in right now? How do I get a basic fundamental human need met right now?
Right. One of the things that we observe is that the overall initiative of personal development, no matter who is engaged in it, is fairly fragmented. I mean, there's tons of books out there. There's lots of coaches, therapists, etc. It's fairly focused on delivering point solutions. In other words, if I've got ADHD or post-traumatic stress syndrome, or I simply don't know how to do a planning process or to brainstorm or even understand my own motivations, those are all kind of individual solutions. Again, many of which are at this point evidence-based and well understood, and many of them that also are in the process of getting there. So one of the things we encounter is that how do you help a person move from point solutions to this overall view? Do you do that in your practice as well? As you know, I notice it's primarily recovery and coaching and addiction that you focus on. Do you carry your practice into the other areas, or do you advise your clients in those areas?
So great question. So I think everybody's journey in life, everybody's full expression of their hopes and dreams and the living the best version of their life looks completely different. So we're all trying to paint a different picture. So there's going to be different colors, different brush strokes, different canvases, different modalities that we can use to experience that full expression. And evidence-based practices or any tools can be, that somebody has found value in. Then that's a proven tool that you can use. However, it doesn't mean that it's going to provide a guaranteed outcome for you if you're trying to get there. So I think we always have to come back to this understanding that we are a unique individual and there's unique challenges and obstacles that we have to overcome. Now, maybe we can go find a tool that helps somebody with a similar challenge and try it out and see if that's going to work for us. See if we can adopt it into our personal philosophy to help us grow. But maybe it doesn't. So I think, this journey through life is a continuous evolution, and there's going to be things that we need to grow to overcome today. And then as that painting or as that canvas continues to evolve, there's going to be other tools that we'll need in the future. But I think it certainly needs to be personalized. With the work that I do, it really starts on the foundation of meeting these three basic fundamental human needs that I know veterans are challenged with when they transition out. The first is for connection. So connection to a tribe, connection to a community, and very importantly, connection to yourself. Connection to the good parts of yourself, because that's where our sense of self-worth and our sense of self-confidence comes from. If we don't have a sense of self-worth, if we don't have that self-esteem to believe that we deserve a better experience, then it's very hard or very challenging to take those steps to move in that direction. So I think that's really lays the foundation, the fundamental nature, the footing for anything else that we want to take. So first, getting out of the hole, getting back onto our own 2 feet, and then from that place, creating a vision of what you want your life to look like so that you can go find the right tools. Because there might be some beautiful tools, a great book, something that transformed hundreds of thousands of lives. But if that's not the specific challenge that you're trying to overcome, then no reason to delve into that.
Right. Okay. And is now, in speaking to this, it sounds like you're describing some of the components of ValiantPath. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct. So we use ValiantPath is really inspired, for one, by my work with my mentor, one of my first mentors, Jack Canfield, and a lot of the work that he does through the success principles. So it was really somewhat leverages that, but then it's really built on a framework around applied positive psychology. So this looks at those different parts. And first and foremost is regaining that sense of positive self-worth, the emotional resilience, that positive identity, because without that, then, any of the other tools and things, it's really hard to follow through on something. When you start to face a challenge, any changes that we try to make, it's going to create an uncomfortable situation. If you don't feel that you're deserving of something or capable of overcoming that, then a lot of people will kind of fall off and they won't follow through on the changes that they want. So first, getting your basic human needs met, understanding why and how some of those might have been challenged so that you can build a foundation so that those needs will continue to be met. And then creating that vision to move forward. And through the framework of ValiantPath, we do that again with applied positive psychology, looking at the different areas of human flourishing, and then introducing some different tools or resources to help individuals progress along those different pathways of human flourishing.
Right. And for our audience, I think we need to distinguish a little bit between positive psychology and the old psychology of, say, Myers-Briggs, et cetera, in that positive psychology is the early 2000s, and it has a much different focus, and it speaks to positive attributes. Myers-Briggs is considered a little antiseptic and a little less positive in nature, although it's still a very effective tool. And we just want to make sure that they understand what you're using here and what you're referring to.
And I see a lot of relationship between the delineation between traditional psychology, positive psychology, and also the delineation between clinical or non-clinical support or services. So I understand myself working in the recovery coaching space. Really, this is the non-clinical space. So I understand clinical care, and this is a gross generalization, but a clinical care looks at helping you identify what's wrong with you, or identifying the symptoms of what's wrong with you to give you a diagnosis to help you identify your defects, and then trying to mitigate the negative effects of those defects. Whereas applied positive psychology and the coaching, the non-clinical space, my focus is really on helping you identify the strengths that you have and the things that you have working for you and the inherent value and self-worth that you have, and then building upon that. It's both two roads trying to get to the same place where somebody's experiencing a better expression of their life, but it's coming at it from two different ways. And in that, they can both be very, complementary in nature. If we can mitigate some of the negative things that are holding us back while infusing some more of the positive and leveraging some of the strengths, then we can get to maybe a higher place or get there much faster.
Right. So let's back up just a moment to, you talk about it as unspoken trauma, and you previously said basically, the unspoken trauma is we don't know what to do as we get out and leave federal service. Is there more elaboration around that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, certainly. So the message was from the unspoken trauma, and what I look at and would deliver in the TEDx talk is these basic fundamental human needs that I understand that we have, and the way that they're challenged or lost, the way that we fulfill those needs is challenged or lost when we transition out of the service. First and foremost is connection. So we do need to be connected to a tribe. We're tribal creatures. We do our best. Not only do we need it to do our best, but we need it for a sense of safety and security. If we don't have connection, then it's very, looking at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those two, bottom levels in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you need connection in order to fulfill those needs. Beyond that, we also have a need for authenticity, or permission to show up as we are and to feel valued as we are, to share what we think, to ask for what we need, without having to hide any part of our truth. And both of those play together, or kind of overlap and support one another very well. Because if you don't have authenticity, then any connection that you get isn't going to satiate that need, because it brings with fear, or some other worries or concerns. If you're wearing a mask to show up as a version that you think will be accepted, then you're not receiving the benefit of that connection that you're striving for. Right. The third need is for a sense of meaning. So a sense of meaning is a beautiful thing, and it can help us navigate many challenges in our life. But what I've come to learn especially through the work of Dr. Viktor Frankl, is that a sense of meaning is also what provides our capacity to endure suffering. So if we've lost our sense of meaning, then we've also lost our capacity in some ways to overcome some of the obstacles and challenges that are going to come up in life. So if we don't reconnect with or foster that sense of meaning in our life, then we're really not able to lean into this development, our personal development, or achieving this expression of our life that we want. So sense of connection, did you feel a difference in the sense of connection that you had from those that you were serving with to those that you came out? And if you did you feel in any ways that you needed to show up as a version of yourself? Because if you did, then that has negative effects, as I've seen and personally experienced, that has very negative effects on the way that we feel about ourselves, that confidence and the self-efficacy that we show up with, and then losing that sense of meaning. For a lot of individuals, especially when you're 18, 22 years old, you're called into the service because of the profound sense of meaning that it can provide. And for a lot of individuals, they're never able to find something to replace that sense of meaning when they transition out. And if you're caught off guard, if you're not prepared for this, and you lose all three of those fundamental needs in an instant, that can be, and that is, a traumatic experience for a lot of individuals.
Right. Well, that's good. Any general comments you care to share with our audience today?
Oh, where do I start? How many hours do we have? No, so I'm grateful to be here, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. And I see a lot of overlap in our understanding of personal development and really living the best expression of our life. There's a lot, focus on the empowerment piece. There's a lot on personal responsibility, and the ways that we can overcome things. You talk a lot about the environment that we're brought up in and how that affects the way that we feel about ourselves, or the opportunities that we have, or the way that we, the way that even our genes are expressed, and some of the latest science showing about epigenetics and the way that our genes are expressed. However, I know that there's an opportunity to find a way to get to whatever outcome you want, regardless of your environment or regardless of past circumstances. There's some tool, there's some road that you can take, there's some map that can be laid out for you to help you get there. And one of the first things that was introduced to me by my mentor when he said, you've got to take 100% responsibility for your life. And I see this response in a lot of individuals is I was like, man, I feel very judged. Like, you mean I'm 100% responsible for anything in my life that isn't the way that I want it right now? So it felt disempowering, but as I further investigated that and realized, like, no, that's the most empowering thing that I've ever heard. Because if I'm 100% responsible for everything in my life the way that it is, then I don't have to rely on anybody else. I don't need any amount of luck or breaks or outside influences to help me get to where I want to get to. There's something that I can do in myself. There's something that I can seek, something I can learn, a new skill that I can develop to get to where I want to get to. And that's extremely empowering. And when we realize that we're in the driver's seat, then that brings a sense of ownership and a joy to understanding that things can be limitless and we don't have to rely on somebody else.
Right. And truly, it is empowering. I saw that when I was, making my transition as well. And to know that, you can get help along the way, right? And you can't solve everything at once. You have to start learning to deal with it in a new venue. But yeah, it's very empowering.
And it doesn't mean you won't need outside tools and resources, but you're in the driver's seat to go find those tools and resources.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing we try and do at Lifelong Fulfillment is show people the way to orchestrate their plan, to set goals, tactics, how to shift their focus when things change. Because, your life is made up of nothing but changes. So being prepared gives you all the strength to do exactly what you want to do and make good judgments. We also find that the other thing it does is it steers you away from wasting your time and resources and your focus, which can be very frustrating. And I know I've gone down a couple of blind alleys too, but that's really important. Well, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. First of all, it's really impressive that you're delivering this kind of message to the community, and this kind of coaching is really important for people. So we appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thanks for the opportunity to have me on your show.
So tell us, Garret, if people need to reach you or want an interest in following up on your TEDx, tell us about how they can reach you and find you.
Certainly. So for one, I think I'm the only Garret Biss on social media. So if anybody wants to find me I'm on all the platforms. You can find me there. If anybody wants to, if you know a veteran, if you are a veteran, if you love a veteran, work with a veteran, I highly encourage you to check out unspokentrauma.vet. That's a place where you can not only view the TEDx, it's a 10-minute talk, but you can view the TEDx. And also there's a way where you can invite other individuals. If you want to host a virtual watch party, then I'll jump into a Zoom room. We can invite your friends, your colleagues. We'll watch the 10-minute talk and then have an opportunity for sharing and discussion after that. If you might be interested in ValiantPath or you want to know a little bit more about what that is, you can go to ValiantPath.vet. And we talked a little bit about this, but it's really important, I've found, for somebody to be on their own 2 feet and to have a good footing so that they can start to apply and make some of the changes that they want. Right. Sometimes we get stuck in a place where we're not there and we need a little bit of a reset in order to get back to a better place. If anybody feels that they're in that kind of situation, or if you just like a beautiful tool that can help you get help you have a little bit of an emotional mental health reset, you can go to thewarriorreset.com. And there I share 4 of the most powerful and very quick interventions that I've come across to help with that emotional, that spiritual, that mental health reset. So you can go to thewarriorreset.com, 4 interventions. You can do them all in less than 15 minutes a day. And if you do it, you're going to experience a drastic shift that's going to help put you back in the driver's seat.
Right. Great. Well, thank you so much for your attendance today on Vision in Action Live. Your insights are really valuable, and we appreciate the work you're doing there.
Appreciate you, Jim. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And to wrap up this episode of Vision in Action Live, we want to thank you for joining us and thank our guest today, Garret Biss. Vision in Action Live podcasts are every week. They focus on interviews with subject matter experts and people leading self-directed lives. You can check out newsletters, podcasts, reference materials, and the book Lifelong Fulfillment at lifelongfulfillment.com. And you'll find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, our podcast on YouTube, and your favorite podcast channels as well, most likely. And we're also on KFRED Internet Radio. I'm Jim Boswell. I'm your host. Comments and questions and suggestions for future episodes are welcome at jim@lifelongfulfillment.com. Until next time, stay focused.